My name is Shayna Cosenza. I'm 37, the oldest, the one my family calls when life leaks, snaps, or explodes. I'm a cardiothoracic surgeon. My days are measured in checklists, alarms, and the rhythm of a heart on a monitor. I run for relief, save for emergencies, and rarely let anyone see me falter. My life has always been about control because, growing up, I learned very early what it sounded like when adults panic behind closed doors. At 10, while my mother whispered through tears over bills, I learned the taste of fear, the weight of responsibility, the power of being useful. I could translate the chaos into calm, at least enough to keep the household functioning. Dad was practical, stoic, always repairing, always covering cracks I didn't yet know existed. And Julia, my sister, 2 years younger, was bright, spontaneous, and endlessly captivating to our parents. I learned to fade into the background, to make myself indispensable, to fix, to anticipate, to prevent. When Mom and Dad announced they were approaching 50 years of marriage, something inside me stirred. I didn't want another dinner, another framed photo, another polite toast. I wanted to give them a memory that would anchor their joy, a gift that wouldn't squeak with age or whisper the weight of bills past. I wanted permanence, stability, a place untouched by struggle. I found it by accident. A listing, tucked between ordinary real estate ads, caught my eye. A small, crooked, stubbornly cheerful blue house perched above the bay, whitewashed decks, 2 palm trees swaying in the wind, windows that caught the sunset like glass lanterns. The air smelled like salt in the photos, and I swear I could feel it, could hear the tide push through the boards even before I stepped foot there. It was slightly imperfect, leaning, quirky, but perfect in a way that promised warmth, laughter, and peace. I called the agent, arranged a viewing, and drove down one Saturday morning. The house greeted me like it had been waiting for someone who would understand it. Inside, the floors creaked with character rather than warning, and the sunlight spilled across the kitchen in gentle streams. It wasn't just a house. It was a home that wanted to exist for them for decades to come. I imagined Dad leaning against the banister, Mom propped on the deck railing with a book and tea, the two of them laughing over something small, ordinary, their shadows stretching into the sunset. I bought it the moment I could, closed in their names, set up utilities, prepaid taxes, and even stocked the fridge with the essentials I knew they liked: fresh bread, lemons, strawberries. I left a note tucked inside the silverware drawer, a small, handwritten instruction for slow mornings and loud laughter. Love tea. Laugh often. I didn't tell anyone, not Julia, not Kyle. This was theirs, pure, untouched, and mine to give. Driving back, I felt an unusual lightness. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of someone else's chaos. I was carrying hope, and it felt strange, almost frivolous, to feel so unburdened. I imagined the drive down on their anniversary, the cake I would carry, the sparkling cider I had chilled, the look on their faces when the keys clicked into their hands. I wanted them to feel, truly feel, that they had earned this, that the world could still be generous in a way that didn't leave marks on the walls or shadows on the floors. I remember the sacrifices of my youth. I remember the nights my parents stayed awake worrying, the way I sent money to Julia for braces or her first apartment, the countless little interventions to keep things together. It had always been my role, my habit, my identity. But this was different. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't just preventing collapse. This was building something lasting. I imagined the first morning in that house. Sunlight through the palm fronds. Coffee on the deck. My parents' hands brushing against each other across the table. No overdue bills. No tension. No whispers of fear. I imagined the quiet triumph of giving something that couldn't be taken away by circumstance or bad timing. A gift that was real. Tangible. Unbreakable. And then, of course, reality reminded me that nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. Even perfect plans have cracks. Even homes have doors that open unexpectedly. Even gifts carry consequences. Even love is complicated. I didn't know it yet, but the house wasn't just going to be a gift. It was going to be a battleground. But for now, driving back, I let myself breathe. For the first time in a long time, I imagined them free, laughing, safe, loved. And I allowed myself the reckless, delicious thought, I did this. I can do this. And they will love it. After I decided on the house, the work began. I approached it like surgery, meticulous, methodical, with no margin for error. Every detail mattered. From the moment I signed the deed, I thought not only about my parents' happiness, but about their safety, comfort, and privacy. A gift this big required precision, or it would unravel before it could even arrive. First, I set up a trust. The house would belong to them, yes, but legally it had to be theirs, protected from interference, from well-meaning relatives, from anyone who might mistake generosity for invitation. I appointed myself successor trustee, not out of selfishness, but to ensure their comfort and security. Everything was prepaid: property taxes, utilities, even the homeowners' association fees for the first year. I wanted the house to arrive as pure possibility, not responsibility. Then there were the physical preparations. Locks replaced, keypads programmed, lights set on timers to catch the sun and the evening breeze. The fridge filled with fresh bread, coffee, fruit, cheeses, and sparkling cider. A note tucked in the silverware drawer, small and precise: love tea. Laugh often. A small, private message that would greet them before words or explanations could intrude. I didn't tell Julia. I didn't tell Kyle. This was my secret gift for my parents, not a stage for family drama. Over the years, I had learned that some people confuse opportunity with ownership, kindness with entitlement. Julia, with her constant flurry of charm and chaos, was the first to blur the line. Kyle, her shadow, had an ego the size of the house itself. They were smart, capable, charming, and manipulative, but this time I would be smarter. The week before their anniversary, I called them under the pretext of a simple family dinner. They were unsuspecting, gleeful even, when I mentioned a weekend getaway to celebrate. I packed the car myself. A cake from their favorite bakery, the sparkling cider chilled and safe in a cooler, little touches I knew they would notice. Each item was chosen for comfort, joy, nostalgia. I wanted them to step into a home that already whispered, "Welcome, you belong here." On the drive down, I rehearsed my mental checklist. Locks, replaced. Utilities, paid. Kitchen stocked, check. Trust documents, ready, notarized, recorded. Keys, in hand. I had even scoped out alternate routes to avoid traffic, to make the first glimpse of the house as flawless as possible. It felt almost absurd, this level of preparation, but absurd is sometimes the only way to protect what matters. And yet, beneath the control, a small knot of anxiety formed. After years of being the one who fixes everything, I knew the unexpected was inevitable. Life had a way of intruding, of ignoring plans, of twisting good intentions into awkward confrontations. Still, I couldn't let fear stop me. If I hesitated now, the magic would slip, and my parents would never know the freedom I wanted for them. I imagined their reactions repeatedly. Dad, tentative at first, running his hands over a polished banister as if remembering his youth, his steady voice breaking with emotion. Mom, moving from room to room, eyes bright, discovering small treasures I had left behind. Fresh lemons on the counter, strawberries in the fridge, the note in the silverware drawer. I imagined them stepping onto the deck for the first time, breathing in the salt air, watching the water glint like 1,000 scattered diamonds in the sun. I imagined the relief in their eyes. No bills, no reminders of struggle, no echoes of past panic. Yet even as I imagined perfection, I didn't trust it entirely. Years of experience, both personal and professional, taught me that perfection is fragile. Someone could show up unexpectedly. A neighbor could misunderstand. Julia could triangulate the address from a social media post. But I had minimized risk. Every angle accounted for. Every possibility prepared for. This house would reach my parents untouched by the chaos of others. By the time I arrived on the morning of their anniversary, the sun was high, the water gleaming in streaks of gold. My car pulled into the driveway, cake and cider in tow, heart racing not with excitement alone but with anticipation, hope, and a hint of dread. Everything was ready. Everything was perfect. Or so I thought. At that moment, I could only breathe in the salt air, feel the warmth of the deck beneath my hands, and remind myself why I did all of this. Not for recognition, not for thanks, not for admiration. For them. For the two people who taught me responsibility, love, and endurance. For the quiet joy of seeing relief settle into their eyes. This house wasn't just a gift. It was a chance to repay decades of love, sacrifice, and quiet worry. And as I reached for the keys, the world was still. Too still, maybe. The way stillness holds the promise of either serenity or surprise. I didn't know it yet, but the next moments would test everything I had planned. The house would reveal the cracks not in the walls, but in the assumptions we make about family, love, and entitlement. But I was ready. I had prepared. I had planned. And I was determined that my parents would feel nothing but joy when they stepped inside. The driveway was supposed to be a quiet prelude, a slow exhale of anticipation. Instead, the first thing I saw was an SUV I didn't recognize, parked haphazardly across the gravel, half in the shade, half in the sun. My chest tightened. That wasn't supposed to be there. I stepped out of the car, cake in hand, sparkling cider rattling against the cooler, and paused. The front door wasn't closed. It was wide open, swinging slightly in the bay wind. A cartoon blared from inside, the kind I hadn't even plugged in yet. I froze. Mom appeared in the kitchen doorway, a dish towel clutched in her hands like a white flag. Her eyes were red, her mouth slightly parted, unsure. Dad was slumped in a chair, shoulders rounded, hands trembling. Boxes cluttered the floor, voices echoing from the hall. My carefully constructed vision of serenity, deck, sunlight, calm laughter, had collapsed in the span of one heartbeat. And then I saw him. Kyle. Bare feet, a half-empty beer in hand, his favorite football shirt stretched over his chest like a badge of entitlement. He planted himself in front of Dad, jabbed a finger toward the door, and barked, "This is my house. Get out!" From the couch, Julia leaned back, smirking. "Relax, Dad," she said. "We're just getting settled." The plastic cake lid pressed against my palm, and I realized I hadn't exhaled since stepping onto the gravel. Something inside me went quiet, sharp, precise. The voice that usually negotiated crises and emergencies didn't rise yet. It was observing, calculating. I remembered all the years of covering for Julia, paying for braces when insurance failed, co-signing her first apartment, covering her rent when Kyle's startup didn't pan out. Every transfer, every check, every late-night panic call had been an attempt to sand down the rough edges of our family, to prevent chaos from hitting too hard. But here, now, my careful scaffolding wasn't enough. My gift, my love, was being hijacked by entitlement masquerading as family. I took a slow breath. Placing the cake on the counter, I let my eyes sweep the room. Toys scattered across the floor, takeout boxes stacked on the counters, the cartoon still blaring, echoing like a carnival of intrusion. Mom's hands shook as she set down the dish towel. Dad's hands were folded in his lap, not because he was calm, but because he was trying not to be pulled into a fight he didn't want. "Kyle," I said, my voice even, precise, low. "Who told you this is your house?" His grin faltered for a fraction of a second. "Family money, family house," he said, shrugging, as if that explained everything. "Don't make it weird." Julia laughed lightly, like she was watching a performance. "Shayna, you always make everything so intense." I didn't respond to her. Instead, I glanced at my parents, the people I wanted to shield from chaos, and then back at Kyle. The voice inside me, that never falters during surgery, that never wavers when life hangs in the balance, clicked on. I moved toward the counter, laying out a folder. One by one, the documents slid across the polished surface. Deed, trust instrument, proof of prepaid taxes, HOA rules, a color printout of Airbnb listings that had been created without authorization. Kyle's smirk tightened. "Try stopping me," he said, but his tone lacked conviction. I met his gaze evenly. "I already have, and I will legally. Every booking canceled, every key reprogrammed, every unauthorized action reversed. This house is theirs, and it stays theirs. You are guests, not owners." Julia's laugh cracked under the weight of a seriousness she hadn't anticipated. She leaned toward me, voice dripping sugar. "Shayna, we're just helping. Mom and Dad could use the extra money." I let her words settle into the quiet I had carved around me. "This isn't about money," I said. "It's about boundaries, respect, and protecting the people you claim to love. You've crossed every line, and this stops now." Mom whispered from the sink. "Shauna, explain." Her voice was small, hesitant, but trusting. She didn't ask me to fight. She only asked me to clarify the truth. I turned back to the room, precise, measured. "Everyone to the living room," I said. The cartoon muted. The dog froze mid-chew. The air was thick, tense, heavy with the anticipation of confrontation. Kyle puffed up, confident that bravado could intimidate me, but I didn't flinch. Not now. Not ever. The room held its collective breath as I began. Trust instrument, legal rights, occupancy rules, and the authority I had been granted to secure my parents' home. Page by page, fact by fact, the foundation of my gift became an impenetrable wall. Kyle's gestures became smaller. Julia's confidence waned. The room, chaotic minutes ago, had shifted into a courtroom of precision and consequence. And through it all, I kept my focus on the people I loved most. Mom wiping the counters with trembling hands, Dad staring at the floor, silently hoping I could hold the line. This wasn't about proving myself. It was about protecting them, the home, and the life they deserved. The room was thick with tension, the kind that presses down on your chest and makes every breath deliberate. Julia leaned back on the couch, arms crossed, trying to radiate casual ownership. Kyle's stance was rigid, his beer half forgotten in his hand, eyes scanning the room for weakness. And in the middle of it all, I stood, calm, precise, unyielding. I began with the deed. "This house is legally in Mom and Dad's names," I said. "Recorded last week, trust instrument executed. Lifetime beneficiaries, exclusive right of occupancy. I am the successor trustee. That means I am obligated to maintain this house for their comfort and safety, and to remove anyone interfering." Kyle scoffed, stepping forward. Legal mumbo-jumbo. "You think that scares me?" I didn't flinch. I laid down the HOA rules next, highlighted sections regarding short-term rentals, occupancy, and penalties for violations. I pushed forward the printout of the Airbnb listing that had appeared online earlier that week. His smirk faltered. I didn't think you'd see that," he muttered. Julia leaned forward, voice syrupy. "Shayna, come on. We're just trying to help. Mom and Dad could use the extra cash. Don't make this a big deal." I let the silence hang for a beat, letting them realize I wasn't negotiating. I wasn't here to debate generosity. I was here to protect my parents' home and their peace. Helping doesn't mean taking over. You've already crossed the line. Refund every guest, remove every post, and leave the keys here. My hand gestured toward the counter where the folder lay open. This is not a suggestion. It's the law, and I've prepared for noncompliance. Kyle laughed, a low, hollow sound. "Prepared? For what? You're alone here." I reached for my phone and set it on the counter. Screen up. Drafted emails ready to send to the HOA, the county recorder, the attorney I retained for this exact contingency. Keypads programmed, locks reconfigured, entries monitored. Every move he might attempt had already been anticipated. Every loophole closed. I could see the shift in his eyes, the first flicker of doubt. Julia's voice tried one last manipulation. "Shayna, you think money makes you the parent? That buying things fixes everything? Mom and Dad just want their family around them." I didn't reply. Instead, I picked up the keys from the counter, letting the metal rattle softly. Each beep of the keypad as I reprogrammed it landed like punctuation. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, locked in, precise. Kyle's confidence drained, the arrogance slipping from his shoulders like a worn coat. I explained each step I had taken. The trust, the legal rights, the HOA regulations, the preventative measures for occupancy, even the prepaid taxes. Each detail was a shield, each fact a barrier. By the time I finished, the room was quiet. Julia's smile had faded, replaced by that small, brittle look of someone realizing their manipulation had failed. Kyle's lips pressed together, eyes darting toward the door, considering retreat. Mom finally spoke, softly. "Shauna, thank you." She didn't scold or command. She just acknowledged. Dad didn't move, but the tension in his shoulders eased. Relief washed over me in a quiet, private way. The house was secure. My parents' peace was intact. And yet, Julia tried again. "We were just going to help. The kids, the family." Her words fell flat against the wall of precision and preparation I had built. "The house belongs to Mom and Dad. Your bookings are illegal. Your keys no longer function. Any entry without permission will be immediately reported." I didn't raise my voice, didn't need to. The weight of facts, legality, and consequence was enough. Kyle's last bluff was weak. He glanced at the folder, then at the keypad, then back at the floor. The truth hit him. His attempts to manipulate or intimidate would fail. I had anticipated everything, prepared for everything, and executed perfectly. Julia's attempts at emotional leverage crumbled under the quiet certainty of law and order. I watched them gather their things slowly. Toys, bags, remnants of intrusion, all packed up under the meticulous eye of someone who had done this dozens of times in other contexts, though never quite so personal. Outside, the sound of zippers and dragging bags filled the air. Inside, Mom made tea. Dad simply watched, steady and calm for the first time since the confrontation began. I stepped back, observing. The house exhaled for the first time since their uninvited arrival. Its warmth, the sunlight spilling through windows, the smell of salt and fresh paint. It was as it was meant to be. Julia's last attempt at words, weak and flailing, died against the wall. Kyle's retreating figure left no lingering threat. My parents had their home, and finally their peace. That night, I sat on the deck with them, tea in hand, listening to Dad tell a story about his first apartment and a stubborn mouse, while Mom laughed freely unguarded. No legal documents, no confrontations, just simple moments reclaimed. The house had transformed from a battleground into the sanctuary I intended, and I realized something important. Protecting loved ones isn't about aggression. It's about boundaries, clarity, and unwavering precision. The house finally felt like home. The chaos of Julia and Kyle's intrusion had dissipated, leaving only calm and sunlight. I watched my parents move freely through the space I had carefully prepared for them. Dad wandered onto the deck, hands running along the railing like it belonged to him, because it did. Mom opened cupboards and drawers with quiet delight, discovering the little touches I had left. Fresh fruit, lemons, the note tucked in the silverware drawer. A smile stretched across her face, the kind that doesn't hide behind exhaustion or worry. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of fixing someone else's problem. Julia and Kyle were gone, their attempts to claim ownership thwarted not by confrontation alone, but by preparation, legality, and the clarity of boundaries. I realized, as I stepped back and observed the scene, that boundaries aren't about cutting people off, they're about protecting the people you love from unnecessary harm. Dad finally spoke, voice steady, a rarity these days. "Shayna, I slept through the night," he said simply. His hands no longer trembled. Relief. That was all I needed to know that the gift, the house, had achieved its purpose. Mom poured tea, her hands steady, eyes glimmering with unspoken gratitude. "We can't thank you enough," she whispered, and I only nodded. Words felt inadequate. Julia didn't stop attempting to insert herself into our lives. The family chat lit up with vague posts about greed, about chosen family, about financial cruelty, each message carefully designed to cast me as the antagonist. But I didn't reply. I had already made my position clear. The house was theirs, and any further interference would be met with precise, legal action. I let silence and law carry the weight that words never could. In the evenings, I walked the deck with them, the breeze carrying the smell of salt and the distant echo of waves. Dad told stories of his youth, and Mom laughed freely, unburdened. The house exhaled, its walls holding the warmth and calm that had been promised but threatened. I watched their contentment and felt the quiet satisfaction that comes from doing the right thing, even when the battle is messy, personal, and emotionally charged. The following week, I returned to the city. I had surgeries to perform, patients depending on me, a life that demanded precision. Yet I felt lighter, unshackled by the constant tension that had dominated my adult life. The house stayed with them, unclaimed by entitlement, untouchable by manipulation. My parents' joy was now permanent, anchored in law and love. Occasionally, Julia called, her voice small, tentative, trying to thread guilt or complaint into her tone. I listened once calmly, and then reminded her of the facts. The house belongs to Mom and Dad. All occupancy is controlled through me, and any further interference would be addressed immediately. Her silence after that was a relief. She understood, finally, that this wasn't about money or control. It was about boundaries. Mom sent me photos, her feet propped on the railing, the sunset catching in her hair, Dad smiling freely, unburdened. These moments were what I had imagined, what I had planned for, and now they were real. For once, my meticulous planning had not been undermined by circumstance or chaos. The house belonged to them, and they belonged to the home. I realized something else, quietly, in those moments of peace. My role in the family didn't have to be constant crisis control. My responsibility didn't require sacrifice at the cost of my own life. I could protect, guide, and create security without being the one to absorb every storm. Boundaries weren't abandonment, they were the structure that allowed love to exist safely for everyone. That night we ate on the deck. Pancakes, fruit, tea, laughter spilling over into the salty night air. I watched the flicker of contentment in their eyes and felt a swell of pride that wasn't tied to recognition or thanks. This was the gift, not just the house, but peace. Freedom. The simple joy of a life unthreatened by entitlement or chaos. Julia's posts and calls became background noise, distant and irrelevant. The house had its own rhythm now, a cadence of laughter, quiet mornings, and evenings that ended with the tide brushing against the shore. I had protected something more than property. I had safeguarded love, respect, and memory. By the time I returned for short visits, I saw the transformation fully. Dad's hands were steady, Mom's laughter easy, and the house carried a warmth that wasn't just from the sun but from the calm, loving presence of its rightful occupants. I labeled drawers, set up small instructions for efficiency, and stepped back, knowing this was now truly theirs. I didn't feel triumphant in the way one expects after winning a battle. There was no gloating, no victory dance. There was only order restored, peace achieved, and boundaries respected. In that quiet certainty, I understood the lesson fully. Protecting those you love sometimes requires confrontation, sometimes requires legal precision, sometimes requires letting people face the consequences of entitlement. But when done with clarity and care, it restores not only the home but the hearts within it. The weeks after the confrontation were quiet in a way that felt almost miraculous. The house had settled into itself, the salt air carrying laughter, tea, and the occasional hum of a tide. Mom's mornings were slow and unhurried. She perched on the deck, sipping coffee, toes wiggling in the sunlight, the way she used to when I was 5. Dad wandered through the rooms, occasionally touching the banister, checking the locks, a small, satisfied smile tugging at his lips. I visited when I could, often arriving to find them absorbed in the ordinary joy of life. Dad fixing a squeaky door, Mom tending to a small potted herb she'd placed on the windowsill. The house was theirs in every sense, not just legally but emotionally. It had become a sanctuary, a place where they could be unburdened. I reflected on the chaos that had preceded this peace. Julia and Kyle had tried to impose their vision, to blur lines between help and entitlement. They had underestimated the combination of preparation, legality, and love. And in doing so, they revealed the truth. Boundaries are not optional. They are the structure that allows love to thrive safely. I realized that all the years I had spent bailing out chaos, paying for mistakes, covering gaps, and holding the family together could not substitute for clarity and firm limits. Mom sent me photos, her head thrown back in laughter, Dad holding the kettle with that careful concentration he always has when cooking. Small moments, quiet and precise, and yet monumental in their contrast to the months of tension and intrusion. I printed a small sign and placed it by the door. Welcome home, Sam and Ruth. Nothing more. A simple marker of love and ownership, clear and kind. Julia called once, voice trembling. We're behind. Everything's falling apart. I didn't indulge her. The house is off limits. Boundaries are boundaries. You've had your chance. Consequences follow choice. I won't discuss it further. She hung up. The silence afterward was not empty, it was healed. The threat of chaos was gone, and what remained was structure and peace. I sat on the deck one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, its golden light spilling over the bay. I thought about all the years I had carried responsibility like armor, the weight of emergencies and expectations pressing down. And now, I understood that love and care are not measured by how much you absorb or sacrifice, they are measured by how effectively you protect, create security, and allow life to unfold without unnecessary intrusion. Dad laughed freely as he recounted a story about a boat he once tried to fix with duct tape. Mom rolled her eyes, sipping tea, smiling, completely present. For the first time in decades, the home, their home, was exactly what I had envisioned. A space for joy, freedom, and calm. And I knew I had done more than buy a house. I had preserved their dignity, their peace, and their autonomy. The lessons extended beyond the physical gift. I learned that being useful does not require being the default solution to everyone else's problems. That sometimes, stepping back, setting boundaries, and enforcing them with calm precision is the most loving act of all. The house was a gift, yes, but it was also a lesson for me, for them, and for anyone who thought entitlement outweighed respect. As I left after one visit, the sound of the waves echoing against the shore, I felt a rare satisfaction. Not pride in accomplishment, but a quiet knowledge that what mattered most, peace, love, respect, had been secured. Mom and Dad thrived in their home. The small rituals of everyday life, pancakes, laughter, tea, and conversation, became the rhythm of their days. Julia and Kyle faded to background noise, their interference neutralized, their lesson learned. Driving back to the city, I reflected on the year, the anniversary, the house, and the confrontation. Life would continue to demand precision in the hospital, and responsibility would never fully vanish from my shoulders. But now I carried with me the reminder that my care could be both fierce and disciplined, my love both generous and bounded. I smiled quietly, imagining Mom's pink toenails catching the sun, Dad humming softly while reading, the house exhaling with the tide. I had given them more than bricks and paint. I had given them peace, and sometimes I realized peace is the greatest gift anyone can receive or give. As I turned onto the highway, the bay shrinking behind me, I felt that rare, unshakable certainty. I had done right. I had protected, preserved, and loved. And in the quiet of that knowledge, the house, my parents, and I were finally free.